the kind introduction. So I've been active in this field quite some time, and over the last years took a bit of a detour over in running tech companies. So I'm a doctor by training, then built tech companies that didn't really have anything to do with longevity or life extension. If I'm quite honest, I'm not a managing director at Medlanes anymore, since we recently sold the company to a large UK healthcare provider. And now I've been getting back into this field, or have actually been for a while now, getting back into this field of longevity and life extension with two organizations. So I'm running a company here based in Berlin in Germany, and I'm running a non-profit research organization, a research foundation based in Switzerland. And fundamentally, as I said, like, I've been always very much interested in this longevity field, and actually this is why I in the first place started to study medicine, and then went into cancer research and so on. And of course, everybody I think agrees that there are a lot of good can be done if longevity would be achieved, and or if lifespan can be extended significantly. So my thought process was always twofold, right? So first of all, I very hope that my prior speakers are right, and probably also the speakers that will come after me, and that we're just a few years or a small amount of decades away from making this technology happen. Unfortunately, I'm slightly less optimistic, and partially maybe because I'm coming from the cancer research field. And of course, cancer research has been saying that curing cancer is just around the corner. It's always 10 years in the future, right? It's always 10 years in the future. And last time they mentioned that was when in 2005 the director of the NCI, the National Cancer Institute in the US, said that in 2015 we want to have cancer practically eradicated. It shouldn't be a disease anymore where anybody dies due to it. And of course, everybody knows that we're far away from that. So I was always looking for significantly more tangible ideas of, okay, so let's say you want to live longer. How can we have a chance to live longer, and how can we make living longer a choice? And this, in the end, is why I went for a field which is called cryopreservation or biostasis, and so on, and sometimes also cryonics, right? So of course this field in the past has had some potentially negative connotations attached to it, and of course it's very much a field that might even be less of a mainstream topic than longevity and life extension is so far. But I think it's always important to remember that what is possible right now has not necessarily anything to do with what will be possible in the future. And my thought process always, okay, so let's say all this longevity technology comes around in 20 years, right? So it will still be something that is for most of the people. I'm not sure what the average age on this call is, but most at this conference, most of these people maybe have a shot then at living significantly longer. But then again, 20 years might not be too late for us. And my personal opinion, of course, is that it will take significantly longer. But let's say it's only 20 years, then until that time, there's still a crazy amount of people unfortunately dying without necessarily wanting to die, right? I mean, here are just a few examples, right? Only just 500,000 people under the age of 5, children under the age of 5, just die due to cancer every year. So there's still a significant problem, and a significant problem to be solved until longevity tech comes about. And I think this is the most fundamental claim that this biostasis or cryopreservation field currently has, is saying, hey, if there's no other way right now, if you're being diagnosed with any terminal disease right now, then I can't tell you how high the chance of biostasis working is, but I can at least offer you something. And I want to give you a quick introduction over the next 10 minutes or so into this topic, and then more than happy to continue the discussion further down the line. I think, first of all, it's always very important to remember that this is not about being kept alive, of course, but it's about living the life to the fullest. And as I already mentioned, I think it's also very important always to remember that what currently seems almost impossible might very well be standard practice tomorrow and a standard procedure. And whenever I talk to doctors or people who are in the medical field, I usually use the example of the heart transplantation, right? 20 years before the first heart transplantation, if you would have asked doctors, what do you think about heart transplantation? Is this something that, what do you think about it? And probably most doctors would have said, well, this is super crazy. This is impossible, right? How can that ever work? And of course, currently heart transplantation is a standard medical procedure that no one would want to miss. So I think it's very important to always think about that there's this normalcy bias. Like what we currently consider, what is standard currently, we consider on one hand as good, and on the other hand, it's quite difficult to in quotation marks, I mean, there's the saying, thinking out of the box, right? It's quite difficult to get rid of these thought processes just due to stuff not being possible right now. And of course, this has been happening in the longevity field over the last years, and has been a topic that has been gaining more and more public attention over the last years and decades, not so much decades, more years, where it now is a significant sector. I just want to make the case that more and more people who think about that are interested in this topic, and you can start very far in the past, when Benjamin Franklin basically said, hey, if I could be revived in some capacity in the future, that would be great. I would do that. Then of course everybody in the US and in Silicon Valley and so on, there's a large amount of well-known tech entrepreneurs and tech billionaires and tech millionaires who are into it, and so on. But not only that, also a large part of the general population seems to be significantly more interested in this topic than might be generally, what you might generally consider. And for that note, a while ago we ran a large study where we asked people in the US and in Germany as well, together with a data set of around 3,500 people. A large set of questions about what their sentiment towards these topics is. And if you talk about, I have this one example here, and you can check it out. It was just recently published in PLOS One. If you ask them, hey, these are statements to agree with, right? If I could live indefinitely, even forever, I would. 26% is a pretty. I mean, of course, it's a minority, but it's a pretty significant minority of people who are interested in doing that, and that seems pretty much stable between Germany, which we used as a representative country of Europe, and then the US as well. But coming back to the topic of how does it actually work? How does this biostasis topic actually work? And this is a very, very broad introduction, of course, but I assume that most people have not heard about this topic much. So I'm taking kind of a high level introduction. So the idea of biostasis is practically that medical issues that are currently not solvable will very likely be solvable in the future. Now, should you be diagnosed with a currently uncurable disease, let's say cancer or a serious heart disease or a serious neurodegenerative disease, or should you just die due to old age or accidents, then, well, all these advances in the future don't really help you at all. So the only thing that I'm aware of that you can do right now is what is called cryopreserving your body, which uses very, very low temperatures in the range of minus 196 degrees, so really, really low, and specialized cryoprotective solutions to stop ice formation and do other things. And the goal, of course, fundamentally is that if you cryopreserve your body, and of course, most importantly, your brain and the neural connections, so the connectome of the cells in your brain, then arguably, with future technology, once it has advanced enough, it might very well be possible to then revive you, to then live on in the future. And of course, this is a concept that some of you might be aware of from sci-fi movies, right? So this is, of course, how this came about in the first part, where you have these, over long periods when you do space travel or intergalactic or interstellar travel, and you have these cryopods where someone is being cryopreserved and then being revived once they arrive at their location. And fundamentally, it's the same process or the same idea. And this is what my foundation and also my other organizations are working towards, to first of all offer this as a thing that people can actually do, which of course there are some US companies that have offered that, or foundations that have offered that for a while now. But in Europe, it has very much been a very niche topic over the last decades. So we're very much focused on professionalizing that, and then the foundation part is there to do basic and applied research and also development in that field. What's very important to always note here. So this picture is one from an article that was recently published about us in an online magazine called Sifted, and of course, unfortunately, the picture couldn't be further from reality, unfortunately, because always they depict that as these ice cubes, and if anybody has ever frozen some vegetables and taken them out of the freezer, I think you're pretty aware of that. This freezing living things and then taking them out, thawing them, is not necessarily a great idea. They get mushy and don't really maintain their structure. So it's very always important to note here that even though it's very easy to say, hey, someone gets frozen and then someone gets unfrozen, this whole procedure is very far from freezing. In fact, a lot of the technology that is being employed is specifically used to not freeze anything. So it's a specialized preservation process that is called vitrification, which uses these very low temperatures and so-called cryoprotective agents, as I mentioned on my slide before, to practically stop all metabolic processes and preserve the body, and most importantly, again, the brain, in a state where further degradation doesn't happen. And now, of course, the idea is that in the future, this can then be reversed. So the steps to kind of give you an idea on a very high level basis, again, is, you sign up for one of these organizations. Then should something happen to you, there's a medical team. In Europe now, there are a few medical teams that we've built up. In the US, there are others as well, which practically act like an emergency service. Should something happen to you, should you be pronounced dead anywhere in a hospital or so on, then these teams will rush to you, start reducing your body temperature. And what's important to note now is the further you reduce the body temperature, the less oxygen, the less energy the cells need to survive. So the further you cool down, the longer you can maintain cells without any further damage. And then once you arrive at one of these cryopreservation facilities, which are practically medical institutes, usually run by foundations to make sure that there's no commercial interest and long-term stability, then the process is actually done, which the cryopreservation process itself is being done, which means cooling down, currently in most cases to minus 196 degrees. And at that temperature, you can then maintain the body, practically speaking, indefinitely. And of course, now all of that sounds at first hearing, that might sound a bit like sci-fi, but then again, think back to the heart transplant example, and this of course is only an example, right? You can also take airplanes and whatever you want. There's a plethora of examples where technology that is currently practically not imaginable is very much a standard practice in the future. And then of course the idea is that at some point, medical technology will have advanced enough so that all the damage that still is accumulating, and also of course the underlying disease that killed you or led to your death in the first place, is curable, and then that and of course also that revival is possible, and then to then live on in the future. And of course, and this is why I don't think the longevity sector and this is at all at any opposite ends of a spectrum. It's basically just going in the right direction with two different solutions. Because of course, in the future, you then arguably would like to have significant longevity and life extension technologies available to then continue living significantly longer and not die, 5 years later, because you might be at the end of your lifespan in the future as well. So to make this a bit tangible, so as I said, like there are medical teams. We have a few. This is an example from ours, which is based here in Berlin, which are practically specialized ambulances that are arguably mobile operating rooms that can do these procedures on site. Then you have these long-term storage facilities. It's very important to always note here that they're being run by non-profit foundations to make sure that during the time when someone is in cryopreservation, nothing happens to the body. There are no commercial interests, and the cryopreservation itself is maintained. What's interesting always to note is that once someone is in cryopreservation itself can be maintained indefinitely, because you only use the interest from the amount of money that this procedure costs, which unfortunately currently is still very, very significant. So the foundation, for example, that we have in Switzerland will require around 120,000 euros to do to maintain cryopreservation. Of course, this is very much a factor that is factored, and I'm very much this is very much a thorn in my eye. I'm really in quotation marks annoyed by that. So I would like to bring prices down significantly and make these procedures available to practically everybody, regardless of wealth. And to do that, unfortunately, the only thing that you can reasonably do is increase interest and increase membership by a few orders of magnitude. And then due to effects of scale, you can bring costs down. So last but not least, of course, then revival would be in the future. And arguably, this, of course, needs future technology that is currently not available. And then you live on and basically continue your life. Again, I would like to definitely stress that this is not technology, the revival part. This is not technology that is around right now, right? So this leads significant advances in technology, and these probably will not take 10 years. They probably will not take 20 years. They probably will take a good amount longer. So my guesstimate is like 50, 100 years, however long it might need. But important always to note as well is that once you're in cryopreservation, time is not really an issue anymore. So you can maintain, without further degradation and deterioration, this cryopreservation preserved state, practically speaking, indefinitely. Last but not least, thanks a lot for your attention, and thanks a lot for the invitation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You see my contact information here on the bottom of the page. We're more than happy to just advise people on how this whole topic works and discuss this topic in any capacity.